Good evening, everyone. Good evening. My name is Faraine Griffith, and I'm the community organizer for civics and community empowerment at the Office of the New York City Public Advocate, Jamani D. Williams. In honor of National Breastfeeding Awareness Month and Black Breastfeeding Week, I'd like to welcome you. I'd like to welcome everyone to this powerful info session where we will learn best practices, health benefits, and your rights as it pertains to both breastfeeding and chest feeding. I wanted to give welcome, and I want to mention introduce our panelists. They're going to be presenting today. We have, first and foremost, we have Miss Janice Clarke, certified lactation counselor for JC Lactation Counseling LLC. And then we have Miss Odessa Finn, licensed midwife and director of midwifery at the New York City Health and Hospitals Harlem location. And then we have Samelys Lopez, associate human rights specialist at the New York City Commission on Human Rights. I'd like to thank you all for joining us tonight. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat and we'll answer them when we get to the Q&A portion. Again, I would like to welcome you to this program. And I want to shout out our partners. Ancient Song Doula Services, Birthright Podcast, Bronx Rebirth and Collective Progress, Christopher Rose Community Empowerment Campaign, the IRTH App, JC Lactation Counseling LLC, New York City Black Women's Political Club, New York City's Commission on Human Rights, New York City Health and Hospital, Harlem location, and New York City Midwives. And last, but certainly not least, is Rebecca's Little Survivors Foundation, Inc. And thank you again to our partners. We want to make sure we always just shouting out our partners because we can't do the work without our partners. So let us begin. We will start with Miss Janice Clarke with her presentation.
Thank you, Faraine. Good evening again, everyone. My name is Janice Clarke, she, her, and I'm a Bronx-based certified lactation counselor and the founder of JC Lactation Counseling. So my company is a private practice offering prenatal education and postpartum lactation support. I am also a maternal health advocate, a certified facilitator with the Chocolate Milk Cafe Harlem Bronx chapter, and a volunteer with the Public Health Solutions New York City Breastfeeding Warm Line. I am training to become an international board certified lactation consultant, also known as an IBCLC. I am earning my clinical hours with my chief mentor in Greenwich, Connecticut, and through the IBCLC internship program at Jamaica Hospital Medical Center. I have a bachelor's degree in health science and graduate coursework towards my master's in public health. I have a background in environmental health and safety, and I spent 9 years of my career working in medical schools, institutions of higher education, and for the New York City Departments of Health. It's a big difference from what I used to do to what I'm doing now. I know that. At JC Lactation Counseling, our mission is to provide clarity and reassurance. We are curious, empathetic, and relatable, and we strive to provide folks with the information and support needed to feel confident about breastfeeding. Inclusive language and the mission of doing no harm is of utmost importance for me, both personally and professionally. But in the interest of succinctness, please note that when I use the term breastfeeding, that it is inclusive of all feeding practices involving human milk, including lactating, chest feeding, body feeding, and human milk feeding. I also understand that not every lactating person identifies as a woman or as a mother. So this next section, I'm going into my journey, how I end up in this field, how did I how am I here right now? So my personal breastfeeding journey began in February 2019 when I gave birth to my son. Like many new mothers, I struggled with terrible nipple pain for the first few weeks. I really didn't enjoy nursing my son. And on top of all of that, I was suffering from postpartum anxiety. I felt lost and guilty. But worst of all, I felt failed by our healthcare team. I understand now that it wasn't their faults, that they didn't know how to support us. No one was a lactation professional. I didn't know at the time that pediatricians and nurses didn't receive adequate lactation education, and I was heavily relying on them to support me with breastfeeding support. I was advised to use formula even though there was no medical necessity for it. I had a healthy milk supply, and my goal was to breastfeed. I was even steered away from biologically normal processes of breastfeeding, like co-sleeping and nursing at night. The way they pressured me to give my son formula, I felt like my health team didn't believe that I could breastfeed. It was as if my milk wasn't enough, or perhaps I wasn't enough. It felt like my breastfeeding journey was being sabotaged at every step. What I went through in my early days of my motherhood journey could have been prevented if I had started working with a lactation professional earlier on. When I finally made contact with the two IBCLCs provided to me by the hospital where I delivered, I realized that I really couldn't afford them. I briefly felt discouraged, but something internal was driving me to breastfeed. I finally became well enough to venture outside to my local WIC office, and the breastfeeding peer counselor there taught me how to correct my son's latch using the football hold. So, what I mean by that is the latch is how the baby is attached to the breast or chest. And if the latch is not deep enough, it can cause nipple pain. So, even though it took over a month for me to find this relief, this simple solution really made all the difference for me because I was going to stop breastfeeding. I decided to take a lactation counselor training course when my son was 6 months old so that I could solve my own lactation challenges. And I was just tired of hearing bad advice and recommendations that didn't make sense or that didn't feel right to me. I even started to wonder, what was it about me that made my healthcare team disregard my decisions and disregard how I was feeling? I wondered if it was because I was on Medicaid, or if it's because I was unemployed, or if because I was Black. It's so sad when a person begins to wonder what is wrong with them when they experience something awful. The terrible feelings I had and all the news stories of racial injustices in 2020 influenced my decision to open up my own practice in July of that same year. My goal is to provide representation in a geographic area lacking lactation professionals and overall representation in a field that is lacking Black and Brown people. As it stands right now, about 2% of IBCLCs are of color in the United States. So now we are going to talk about Black breastfeeding. So today is the last day of Black Breastfeeding Week, and some might be wondering, why is there a Black Breastfeeding Week? So the following information that I'm going to present is a part of a more robust presentation that I give to birth workers titled The Unique Challenges of Black Breastfeeding. In it, I weave a compelling story about the reasons behind the health disparities we see today by delving into African history, defining key terminology, describing how breastfeeding myths continue to plague Black communities, and ending with actionable items to make the field of lactation a more equitable one, both for professionals and for birthing people. So Black breastfeeding is very complex, and the following challenges are very multi-layered. This is really an hour or two long presentation, and I'm going to try to condense it as much as possible. For hundreds of years, enslaved African women were forced to be wet nurses for the children of their oppressors. Many times, infants and children of these enslaved women died due to malnutrition because they were separated from their mothers and given breast milk substitutes such as dirty water and cow's milk. So there is literal trauma in our breasts, and this forced wet nursing created a negative association with breastfeeding that unfortunately continues until today. So women's bodies in general, or the feminine form in general, are overly sexualized in the Western world, and breasts are not seen for their primary functions in American society. Even worse for Black women because of the stereotypes and negativity stemming from slavery. Black women, especially, may feel uncomfortable breastfeeding in public, and this aversion to public breastfeeding exists today because of the forced nudity and exposure during slavery. So, images of good Black mothers are purposefully absent in society's portrayal of good parenting. There's also a lack of representation in promotional material besides that of white mothers breastfeeding their children. So, Black women are largely invisible in this realm. So, the principles of white supremacy paint Black mothers as cruel or unfit to raise children. So why would they even want to breastfeed if they're busy taking care of other people's children and not their own? Then there are the generations of Black women that didn't breastfeed because breastfeeding reminded people of slavery. So this is a literal lost art form in Black families in the among the African diaspora. Black women and birthing people experience many challenges to maintaining their milk supply when they go back to work. Black women tend to return to work earlier than white women. And more than 80% of Black mothers provide the main source of income for their families and experience discrimination on the job at much higher rates than their white counterparts. So imagine asking for time to pump or accommodations when you're already experiencing negativity and discrimination. So the next factor that goes into explaining why Black breastfeeding is different and unique is racial bias. So racial bias in medicine stems from the creation of race and the idea that certain people are inferior. Believes that Black skin are thicker than white people's skin and that Black people don't feel pain is still very prevalent in this day and age. And this directly causes poor health outcomes. It's because Black people are not listened to, or they believe that we are seeking medication, drug seeking, or that we are looking for attention and not because of a health crisis. Assumptions that Black people don't care about health or don't care about their children and don't want to breastfeed these children still is very prevalent today. And Black moms consistently receive less support and inaccurate breastfeeding information because of the bad Black mother stereotype. Formula makers target Black women specifically for monetary gain. They advertise to Black women that good mothers fed their babies formula. And even healthcare professionals distribute formula to Black women at disproportionate rates compared to white women. And this is regardless of socioeconomic status income levels, or employment status. For those who grew up in and live in America, we really don't see a lot of breastfeeding, especially before the 1990s when the breastfeeding rates were much lower. Folks just didn't encounter it, and when they did, it was probably a shock. I think it is still a shock for some people today. When it's time to feed their own babies, the decision to use formula was probably already preordained since that's what they're already used to seeing. Every baby in their own family was given formula and they grew up and they turned out fine. Now, the challenge of formula is that most of them on the market are made from milk meant to grow a calf. What this means is that, among other things, the protein molecules are extremely large. Laboratories then have to process the cow's milk so that it resembles human milk. With the the protein molecules have to be smaller, and they use fats from vegetable oils and so on and so forth. Formula manufacturers even add components found naturally in human milk, such as oligosaccharides, fats like DHA, and probiotics. But even assessing the safety of these added components to the formula proves difficult due to study design needs and ethical implications. Science's goal is to produce formulas that are as close to human milk as possible. I think is a lofty goal though, considering that formula contains about 40 ingredients, while breast milk contains about 100,000. Human milk is a living substance that changes according to the time of day, the health of the baby, the age of the mother, the types of food eaten, and consists of antibodies, antiviral factors, growth factors, stem cells, 200 different types of oligosaccharides, and so on and so forth. So there is a lot of debates out there that pitting formula feeding families against breastfeeding or chest feeding families. These so called mommy wars have been fabricated by formula companies to capitalize on a parent's natural fears, all in the name of turning a profit. There is no morally right way to feed a baby. Every family and situation is different. And as supporters of this community, we need to honor that. And I am not here to sell breastfeeding. I never sell breastfeeding. Because, in my opinion, our bodies nurtured and grew our babies internally. And they most certainly can do the same externally with breastfeeding. What I am here to do is offer encouragement that yes, we can breastfeed. Black moms can breastfeed their babies too. That is not just for white women, and that it is normal to do so and normal to do so well past infancy. I don't need science to prove that human milk is optimal for human babies. What we need from science is to prove that the formula they are making is safe for human consumption. We need formula companies to accurately list their ingredients and describe all the risks of using their product so that parents are better able to make informed decisions. Because of commercial interest, prioritization of dollar bills over public health and other important factors, human milk feeding has developed a bad rep. I'm sure some of you folks have heard these things. Breastfeeding is nasty. Breastfeeding should only be done at home or behind closed doors, and only with a nursing cover when in public. Breasts are only for sexual partners. Breast milk alone cannot fill up a baby. The nipples must toughen up before breastfeeding. Breastfeeding always hurts. Breastfeeding will spoil your baby. Breast milk isn't real milk. breastfeeding causes saggy boobs. Babies need formula to fatten up. If you have small breasts, you'll make a little bit of milk. But if you have large breasts, you'll make lots of milk. You have to have the perfect diets to breastfeed. If you have a big baby, breast milk won't be enough for them. But conversely, if you have a small baby, breast milk also won't be enough for them. As you all can guess, these are all myths. Breastfeeding is the biologically normal way of feeding children. It would have been evolutionary suicide for humans if breastfeeding was painful, if breast milk didn't fill up a baby, or if babies needed another animal's milk to survive. So, how is milk made? What are the most important things to know as a new breastfeeding parent? As a father or a non gestational partner, how do you offer support? And what do you do when you run into challenges? So, during the second trimester, colostrum, which is the first milk, is already starting to be made in the breast. Many women and pregnant folks notice that their breasts grow larger, or that the areolas become darker, or the nipples become more sensitive. Some may even leak. Colostrum is completely normal if the breasts leak, and is also completely normal if the breasts do not leak. Seeing breast changes is a good sign that you will make milk when your baby comes. So, when the baby is inside of mom or the pregnant person, it is the placenta that delivers the nutrients to the baby. The production of prolactin also begins, and prolactin is the milk making hormone. So, after the baby is born, the breasts take the place of the placenta. Mom's milk now nourishes the baby. Breastfeeding and skin to skin contact protects, secures, and regulates the baby's body functions, such as temperature and blood sugar. And this is a really common question that I ask. Who knows what it takes to build up your milk production? It takes two important things: frequent and effective milk removal. Effectively drained breasts and chest. And this happens by body feeding or pumping. So you can be as hydrated as you want. You can have all the lactation cookies and teas as you want. But if you're not removing that milk from your body is going to downregulate and you're not going to make milk. So the second hormone that is extremely important for breastfeeding is oxytocin. And this is the love hormone. The stimulation of the breasts and tugging of the nipple, whether this is by nursing, pumping, or by using the hands, is this secretes oxytocin and causes the milk to let down from the breast. So the latch, or how the baby is attached to the breast, and the positioning is like the make or break of a breastfeeding relationship. The baby should be facing mom, chest to chest. The baby's chin should be anchored to the breast, nose to nipple, and the head tilted back. When the mouth opens wide, that's when you snuggle your baby in close. The lips must be phalanged out like a fish. The tongue and the lips provide suction and form a tight seal around the nipple and areola. The function of the tongue is extremely important to breastfeeding. The baby has to be able to open the mouth wide enough and suck the nipple deep into the mouth. In order to establish and maintain a sufficient milk supply, newborns must be fed approximately 8 to 12 times in a 24-hour period, and especially overnight because you make more milk at nighttime. Your prolactin levels are actually higher at nighttime. The new baby's stomach is about the size of a cherry, so this is why frequent feeds are important. And babies, especially on the second day and throughout their first few weeks of life, They engage in marathon nursing sessions called cluster feeding. So it may feel like they will never get full. They go on one breast, they go on the next breast, they go on the next breast, and they're still going, they're still going, they're still going. It feels like it's never going to end. It feels like they're just going to cry forever. But this is completely normal, and babies do this to increase the milk supply. It takes about 6 weeks or so for the breastfeeding parent's body to adjust to the needs of their baby. So, as I mentioned earlier, milk has to be removed from the breast in order for more milk to be made. So, the concept of use it or lose it applies to breastfeeding. So, you're probably wondering, how do I know my baby is getting enough milk if they're doing all this nursing? I don't know if they're getting enough. Well, you know that babies are getting enough milk by observing their behavior and taking note of the amount of poop diapers in a day. So the expectation is that on day one of life, there should be one poop diaper and one pee diaper. On day two of life, there should be two pees and two poop diapers. On day three, there should be three poop diapers and three pee diapers. And on day four, there should be four poop diapers and four pee diapers. Your baby, when they're full, they look content, they're limber, they have loose hands, their hands are open, and they may even fall asleep after a feed. So, dads and partners can help with breastfeeding in several ways. They could attend all the appointments and take notes because mommy brain is a real thing. Our brains literally change after giving birth. Getting food, bringing food and beverages during nursing and pumping sessions, changing diapers, and also doing skin to skin with the baby, burping the baby, and offering encouraging words and supports. Encouraging words go a long way. Watching for signs of mental health struggles, especially since postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety are extremely common. So I have an ebook that's going to be coming out soon that's called The Black Woman's Guide to the Pediatric Appointment, What Black Lactating Families Should Know. So this is an excerpt from this ebook that will be coming out shortly, hopefully within the next year. And this is to help to manage the expectation of Black families, because since this information, this milk making, breastfeeding information has been lost, and we're now trying to reclaim it. And is there widely, but we need it to be even more wide. We need everybody in every space and every profession and every field to be talking about breastfeeding and pumping and lactating because this is literally how we feed human beings. It's very important. Excuse me. The most important thing to know, and that I learned the hard way, is that most pediatricians do not have lactation specific education. They may have received 1 hour or so of education in medical school. So if your child's pediatrician is given breastfeeding recommendations or advice, you have every right to ask them how much lactation education they have and to ask for their lactation specific credentials. I've always said to parents that you need to consider the source and to put the burden on them to prove that they are competent in this area. If they do suggest that you get help from a lactation consultant, ask them for a list of professionals or ask them for a directory so that you can search for a professional yourself. It is a good idea. Actually, it is ideal to have a lactation professional identified while you are still pregnant. Learning about lactation and breastfeeding is imperative during the prenatal during pregnancy because this information is so vast that just hearing it one time probably won't do enough. So having somebody identify it in the beginning so that you can hear this information frequently is very, very helpful. The IBCLC is a healthcare professional that manages complex breastfeeding issues and situations. Lactation counselors like myself, breastfeeding specialists, lactation educators, and peer counselors are excellent resources for teaching breastfeeding skills and even to screen those with complex issues. Remember, parents, that you are enough and that you can trust your body to make the milk your baby needs. Contrary to popular belief, your baby can survive and thrive on just human milk. Not every baby is going to be in the 50th, 70th, 90 percentile. Um, and speaking of growth curves, ensure that your pediatrician is utilizing the WHO growth chart, which represents the typical growth of a human on their natural diets of human milk. In addition, the scales at the hospital where your baby was delivered and the scale at the pediatrician office is going to be different. So you might hear something like your baby lost 10%, 12%. It may not be representative, especially if you had a C-section or if you had epidurals or if you had loss of fluids during your labor. That could be the reason why your baby had an increased birth weight and now they're just releasing the fluids from birth. But of course, please seek the help of a lactation specialist so that you can get your answers and have all the puzzle pieces put together. So breastfeeding is a skill, right? There are times when it may not work out in the way that we anticipate. And it's very important to know where to turn to for help. So as I mentioned before, the professionals in the space are the IBCLCs, the CLCs, and the CBSs, like the Certified Breastfeeding Specialists. So these the following websites are very important websites to take a note of, and I could put it in the chat as well. So if you're in New York City and you're looking for, if you're in New York City and looking for lactation help, you can go to websites such as nylca.org. That is the New York Lactation Consultant Association. You can find a CLC at findaclc.org. And you can find lactation consultants worldwide at ilca.org. The New York City Breastfeeding Warm Line, which I volunteer for, I have to plug in there. They can be reached at 646-965-7212 and is staffed by volunteer certified lactation counselors Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. There are also peer-to-peer support groups such as La Leche League and Chocolate Milk Cafe, which is a sacred space for and facilitated by folks of the African diaspora. As I mentioned before, I am a facilitator with the Harlem Bronx chapter. We meet at 10 a.m. on the first Saturday of each month. So if you meet the requirements, if you are Black, if you are lactating, or if you're planning to lactate, or if you are supporting a person who's lactating, please come to our chapter meeting this Saturday. And you can also find the schedule of the other chapters at chocolatemilkcafe.org. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Janice. Janice, I'm sorry. Wow, blown away by the information. Um, so informative. I think a lot of times we as people who are coming from a place of being marginalized and have a history of internalized oppression, don't really have the opportunity always to really express how that intimate history combines with the challenging physical realities that already exist. And so I'm just super grateful to hear this information. I recently had a child just 9 months ago, and so everything that you're saying is so relevant, and it's just really necessary to hear that. And as a father, as a parent who supports a breastfeeding mother, it's really spot on the necessity that we have to really support and be connected to together the human experience of breastfeeding, chest feeding. So wow, it's just amazing. Thank you so much. I just wanted to step in for folks and just give my feedback. Thank you so much, and I'm gonna kick it back to Faraine to continue. Janice, please feel free also to just leave those links in there in the comments for folks so we can follow up. And let me just go into the comments section, and I don't think there's any questions for me, so I'm just gonna kick it back off to you. Thanks, y'all.
Great. No, thank you for that, Solomon. We always looking to hear from a male's perspective because they're part of this discussion. We want to make sure that men are inclusive in the discussion as well. So I thank you for that. And we don't see any questions. And we just want to remind folks again, you can put your questions in a comment and we'll answer them after the presentation. And I want to make mention that this event will include a giveaway raffle for a free lactation consultation and 3 breast pumps. So we're going to have 4 lucky winners who may win. Is it going to be you? Did you register? Are you watching now? We don't know. We'll know at the end of the program. So next up, we'll hear from Odessa Finn. Odessa Finn is a licensed midwife and the director of midwifery at the New York City Health and Hospitals Harlem location. Whenever you're ready, Odessa, you may begin your presentation.
All right. Janice, thank you so much for your presentation and sharing that information. All right, let's get this presentation up for you all. First, I want to wish everyone a happy National Breastfeeding Month and a happy Black Breastfeeding Week. My name again, Odessa Finn. I'll tell you a little bit more about me, but I want to take a minute to just bask in the beauty of these amazing lactating people. My goodness. This outstanding piece of artwork is courtesy of Ariella Kennedy Smith and Samantha Anthony Lee. Shout out to them for bringing such beautiful art to Black Breastfeeding Week and to the world at large. I also want to take a moment to shout out Kimberly Seals-Allers, Kadita Green, and Anaya Sengolede Ayoka. So it's about 10 years now that they launched Black Breastfeeding Week. So we are here because of their amazing work and initiative to highlight and center the experiences of Black breastfeeding and chest feeding people. Let's get into a little bit more of an introduction. Odessa Finn, I've been a licensed midwife in the state of New York since 2011. As of August 8th, the 8th number is a number of new beginnings. I became the new director of midwifery at Harlem Hospital. I am also the co-chair of New York City Midwives, and I am the New York City representative to New York Midwives. I do lots of other stuff, but we're not here to talk about me. That's just to give you a little bit about my background. But sessions like these are super important to me as they present a unique opportunity to have face time with the community in an intimate way. So shout out to Farine and her team, and a huge shout out to our beloved public advocate, Jemani Williams, for being a real one and true to this work. So let's get started. I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about transgender lactation as it relates to chest and breastfeeding. There's lots to cover in this topic, so this is no way inclusive of everything that we should be discussing as it relates to the transgender population in the fourth trimester of pregnancy and lactation. But I want to start out by saying that transgender men, transgender women, non-binary, and gender-queer individuals are physiologically, meaning their bodies, are capable of breast or chest feeding, even if they have had top surgery or they have not birthed themselves. So that's really important to say, and I'll get into more of what I mean by all of these groups of people that have the capacity. Janice talked about, the stigma around breastfeeding and chest feeding, and this notion that the body isn't good enough to do this. So I want to center that even more as we reflect on the experiences of lactation for transgender people. Also important to note is that transgender individuals may elect not to chest or breastfeed due to experiencing intense gender or body dysmorphia. So what am I talking about? Body dysmorphia can happen to anyone. This is not just restricted to transgender population. It can happen to anyone. It is a known mental disorder that can impact anyone and persist until they get some help, some psychiatric help at times. What it entails is an intense focus, shame, anxiety, or perceived body defects. So, for example, someone that may be suffering or struggling with anorexia, not an eating disorder, they may have body dysmorphia. Their body mass index, their BMI, may be below what is healthy for them, because we understand that with very low BMI, there can be health defects like osteoporosis, damage to the bones. So this can happen, and they may just feel like, someone with anorexia may just feel like they are overweight, no matter how much weight they lose, no matter how their BMI continues to go down, and even in harmful ways, they themselves, when they look in the mirror, experience themselves as overweight. So body dysmorphia is a thing, and a consideration, a huge consideration to be had for the transgender community that may not want to chest or breastfeed for that reason. So it would be for a mental health reason that they wouldn't want to do this. What comes to mind for me is a client, a very, very endearing client that I had that had a planned pregnancy with their partner. This was a transgender man, someone that was assigned female at birth and transitioned to the female end of the gender spectrum. And this person, there was so much to talk about in terms of what we know as clinicians and how to offer care to the transgender community. That's a whole nother conversation. But when this client came in for their postpartum check, I always assess for postpartum depression, as we all should. We know that postpartum depression has become one of the leading causes of maternal death. So in doing my routine, just checking in, how are you doing? How's everybody nesting? How are you settling with the new baby? How are you feeling emotionally? That's when the floodgates opened. Sat and I listened, and I will never forget these specific words that he shared with me. He talked about his birth experience, and the birth experience lives forever. I don't care how old someone is. when they find out I'm a midwife, the birth story, they light up. Oh, I remember when I had my child. And it's such an exciting thing for them, but not for this client. Because in his words, during my birth, I had to deal with having a vagina and then the bleeding after the baby. And when I thought that I had kind of gotten over that, then my breast started to produce milk and I just wanted all to stop. So the mental health of our transgender community is extremely crucial because of some of the changes just societally that they experience during their gestation, birthing, and then in the fourth trimester, if they are not wanting to chest or breastfeed, if they are experiencing body dysmorphia. So I just want to recognize the mental health of transgender folks that may not want to breast or chest feed. That deserves support. They should also feel accepted for the choice that they're making to be well for themselves and their new baby. Now I want to take a look at the experience of a transgender man that decided to chest feed his baby. Tanus Posey was assigned female at birth and then transitioned to male, the male end of the gender spectrum, over the course of 6 years. Not uncommon in the transgender community as they receive healthcare, because again, unfortunately, there's lots to be learned by the medical community when it comes to really providing holistic care for this population. So not uncommon, he learned of an unintended pregnancy in 2021 and was about 3 months by the time that he realized he was pregnant. Needless to say, he was absolutely devastated. He was astounded. It was not what he was hoping for. He had to stop taking, testosterone, cold turkey, which he described as absolute hell, just to ensure the safety of his baby. Another unpleasant thought that he shared was the idea of the public's reaction to not just the pregnancy, because again, the experience of transgender people when they are pregnant, that is a whole talk right there. But Posey was concerned about the public's reaction to him deciding to breastfeed his son, Janice. But, Posey was fierce and decided to allay, his fears and anxieties and what people were going to think, and embraced the experience of now breastfeeding his son. And he started to share some of his story on TikTok. Now, if any of you are on TikTok, we know that TikTok can not be nice sometimes. So to say the least, Posey got dragged. They dragged him. They called him a seahorse dad because the male seahorse carries their babies. All kinds of, even people from his own community had not nice things to say. But he stayed the course. He fed his baby, as was presented for you just now. Human milk is made for human babies, and Posey was determined to persevere. Stories like these, people. These are the unsung heroes of lactation, I would say today, because these are the stories that other people hear that have fear and anxiety and that are in the shadows, that empowers them to go forth and do the thing that they really want to do. At the end of it all, Posey had about maybe now 1 million followers, loyal followers, and about 10 million views to his videos on TikTok. Now I want to talk about a little bit about some transgender women. So individuals that were assigned male at birth, but identify as female on the female end of the gender spectrum, that may decide to breast or chest feed their children by induced lactation. So there was a client, 30 years old, that was preparing for the adoption of a child. This was in 2018, well, 2017, and into 18, and went to Zell Goldstein, who's a nurse practitioner, specializing in this area in transgender affirming care, and Dr. Tamar Resman, who's an endocrinologist, also specializing in the care of transgender people. And this 30-year-old transgender woman shared the expressed desire to be able to lactate for this new addition to their family because her partner didn't want anything to do with breastfeeding. Both of these clinicians are out of Mount Sinai. So they conducted a study and put this client on a regimen of drugs, one of which is not available in the US. They got this medication from Canada, so this is not something that is readily available for people. But the point here is to explain how someone who was assigned male at birth and transitioned to the female end of the gender spectrum was able to have induced lactation. So they did this regimen. They included pumping. They started before the child was to come into the home. And within about 2 weeks before the child was into the home, they were able to produce some milk. Within 6 weeks, the baby was fully being breastfed by this transgender woman and breastfed for about 3 months and only stopped because she decided she wanted to make sure her baby was getting sufficient nutrition. All of the pediatric follow-ups deemed the child to have adequate nutrition, weight parameters, and milestones were being met. So sufficient nutrition was getting to this baby. These people also got dragged in the news. There were concerns, much like what was shared in the previous presentation about the cleanliness of breast milk. So you might imagine someone that is on hormonal therapy to induce lactation. There were huge concerns in the media reports that I read about whether or not the milk was healthy for this baby. Was this baby going to have problems because it had received breast milk from a parent that was taking medications? Well, newsflash, everything gets into breast milk in varying degrees. So nobody's breast milk is completely pure. People who are living with mental health disorders who desire to breastfeed find solutions with their care team in order to make that happen. So this is no different. This is one case report. There was another case study done. So this is not a by and large population-based study. But again, the point is to just enlighten us that it is possible. One of the take-homes that I'd like us to have is that the client that I talked about earlier that had the body dysmorphia and ultimately had to go out of work for a few months due to postpartum depression. This information is to kind of undergird the community that may know transgender people that are perhaps planning a pregnancy. This client said, I had no idea that this was going to happen to me. I had no idea I was going to feel this way. I had no idea. I was unprepared. I was completely unprepared for what was to come, just trying to grow my family. Had a super supportive partner, really lovely family, but just was completely taken off guard by the experience with body dysmorphia. So sharing with any transgender people that you may be connected to that may be planning a pregnancy or not planning a pregnancy. Unfortunately, again, we've got to step up our education as clinicians in terms of what we know. Just because someone is identifying one way doesn't mean that they love the way that you think they're going to love, or that they don't need a contraception. They are still to be asked, what are their desires? What are their reproductive goals? They deserve to still receive, again, holistic care. So sharing, turnkeying this information to members of your community to kind of support and undergird their experience as they are. And I'm going to stop sharing so you can see me. I can't see you, but I can let you see me. Undergirding members of your community with information that is affirming, that could be life changing. If this client had known that they were going to experience all of this, they may have been inclined to connect with a mental health professional, just in case. I'm always about being proactive. Let's not wait till we're in a crisis to try to figure out what to do. Let's get you a relationship built with someone that this is in their wheelhouse to support you if you are going to potentially fall into depression because of the changes that occur in the body during the 4th trimester of pregnancy. So I am going to turn it back over to Farine. I thank you all for joining. I hope this information was useful to you all, and I look forward to connecting for future sessions.
Thank you so much. Oh my gosh, that was some great information. I know there's a lot of people that are watching that are members of the LGBTQ community, and they want to know, they may have questions. They may be, thinking about expanding their family, and this is why I say this is such a powerful info session. And again, I want to thank you both. Do we have any questions here? We have a lot of comments. It's a lot of wonderful information, powerful information. So we're seeing a lot of that in the chats. I don't see any questions. And again, reminder, if you have any questions, you can drop them in the comments and we'll answer them accordingly. No more. Yeah, no questions. Okay. Yes, no, it's a lot of very informative. Thank you. It's a lot of that in the chat. So next up, we're going to hear from Samelys Lopez, who is the Associate Human Rights Specialist at the New York City Commission on Human Rights. And whenever you're ready, Samelys, you can go ahead with your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to share the presentation. Let's see, present, share screen, window, share. Let me try something different from beginning. Can you see the presentation in this full screen?
Yes.
Good to go.
Excellent. So my name is Samelys Lopez, and thank you so much for inviting the Commission on Human Rights to be a part of this timely, informative presentation. So I work for the New York City Commission on Human Rights at the Bronx Community Service Center, and I'll be talking a little bit about the Commission on Human Rights, the New York City Human Rights Law, and how it connects to pregnancy and breastfeeding in the workplace and beyond. So the New York City Commission on Human Rights is charged with enforcing the city's human rights law and educates the public on their rights and responsibilities under the law. And these are the different topics that we'll be talking about today. Again, the overview of the human rights law, the commission, the protections that exist against discrimination under our law, and how you can contact the commission to make a complaint if you're experiencing discrimination. So I work for the Community Relations Bureau at the Commission on Human Rights, and our mission is to educate the public on the human rights law and how to let communities know how they can report discrimination to the city, to the Commission on Human Rights. Our law is the most progressive of its kind in the entire country. And we have different lead advisors and liaisons at the agency. We have a bias response and restorative justice team as well. And again, we exist to enforce the New York City human rights law and encourage New Yorkers to report the discrimination that they're experiencing in the community. We also have a law enforcement bureau, and that bureau is charged with looking at the different complaints that are brought forward, either through the hotline or the website, or whenever our community relations team is out about in the community and people come to us with discrimination issues that they're facing. We encourage them to call the info line hotline number to report the discrimination with our legal intake team. And right now, the info hotline number is live. So if you call the number, which I'll be giving towards the end of the presentation, you can speak to someone live about your concern. The Law Enforcement Bureau has staff attorneys. We have special teams there as well, like the Source of Income Unit and the Pre-Complaint Intervention Unit as well. We also send out testers into the community to verify the discrimination complaints that are brought forward to our agency. So what is a human rights law? So it prohibits discrimination in the several areas that you see here: in employment, in the public, in housing. We also cover discriminatory harassment and bias-based profiling by law enforcement. And in order to report an act of discrimination, communities have 1 year to report the act of discrimination, unless it has to do with gender-based harassment. In that case, you have 3 years to report an act of discrimination with the city. You also have the option to file a claim in court up to 3 years after the last discriminatory act, instead of going to the Commission's Law Enforcement Bureau. So these are just general protected classes under the human rights law that our bureau at the Community Relations Unit, we educate people about all the time through the different workshops. So as we see here, the protected class of age, immigration, citizenship status, color, disability, gender, gender identity, national origin, pregnancy, which will be a main topic of this presentation today. Race, hair is also a protected class category under the human rights law. Religion and creed, sexual orientation, big shout out to our LGBTQIA plus communities, domestic workers, and uniformed service, folks in the community. So it's illegal to threaten, intimidate, or discriminate based on all of these different protected categories that I just talked about. And the New York City Human Rights Law protects all these different protected classes. So we have additional protections in employment and additional protections in housing. So the additional protections that exist in employment basically, mean that employers that employ more than 4 employees, or domestic worker employers that employ more than 1 employee, the New York City Human Rights Law kicks in and protects the workers in that space. So basically, people that have prior criminal records are a protected class category under the law. You're not supposed to deny somebody based on their credit history, a job opportunity. In New York City, there's no pre-employment marijuana testing. You can't ask people for their salary history when you're interviewing them, or ask about their sexual and reproductive health choices and decisions. Also, domestic violence survivors are a protected class category under the law. And the additional protections that we see in housing include things like lawful source of income, which is something that we see a lot at the Commission on Human Rights. So that basically means anybody that relies on a government subsidy to pay the rent, whether it's city FEPS, Section 8, or anything like that. If you're out and about looking for an apartment and you're denied housing because you have Section 8, that's illegal under the human rights law. And you should definitely reach out to the Commission on Human Rights and report that. You also cannot be denied an apartment for having children, for being a domestic violence survivor. Sometimes landlords want to deny housing to domestic violence survivors because they're going to bring a lot of drama to the building, but that's totally illegal under the New York City Human Rights Law. And if it's something that you know is happening to you or to someone else, please reach out to us to report it at the Commission. So I'm going to briefly talk about different protections that are now part of the law. So we have domestic workers, which are people that are home attendants, like healthcare, aides, nannies, babysitters, anybody that works in a home-based setting to make ends meet, are now a new protected class category under the human rights law as of March of last year. And, again, employers with only 1 employee, have to comply with these protections that the New York City Human Rights Law has designated for this population. And now I'm sure that you've all heard employers in New York City have to put a minimum and a maximum starting salary for any advertised job opportunity in the community. And something that we're really excited about at the Commission on Human Rights is that as of November of this year, height and weight will be new protected class categories under the New York City human rights law. So our policy team is still rolling out the details, but stay tuned for additional presentations on that new category in November. So, reasonable accommodations for people, workers, and employment include protections that our law, includes. That includes employees with disabilities, pregnant employees, employees who are victims of domestic violence, sexual violence, or stalking, and employees with, special religious observances. And employees are entitled to what's called a reasonable accommodation in case they need to go to a prenatal appointment, in case they need to seek out an order of protection of their domestic violence survivor, in case they need to observe the month of Ramadan, or in case they end up having a disability and they need to take time off work. So these are reasonable accommodations that are provided or should be provided by employers as long as a cooperative dialogue first takes place. So let's say that a pregnant employee says, well, I need to go to seek out my prenatal appointments. And, they have to have that conversation first with the employer so that they can, get those permissions to be able to get that space to, seek out their prenatal care. And if the employer says, well, no, you have to do that on your lunch break, or that's not allowed here, that's totally, something that they can report to the New York City Commission on Human Rights about. But the first step is to engage in that cooperative dialogue to request these reasonable accommodations. And if you're denied, and if it falls within the scope of the New York City human rights law, you can definitely reach out to the Commission on Human Rights and we can follow up. So now we're going to be talking about pregnancy, childbirth, or related medical conditions, which pregnancy is considered to be a medical condition, and how it connects to the New York City human rights law. So the New York City human rights law requires accommodations for pregnant employees, and being denied a job, a promotion, or being let go of a job because you're pregnant violates the human rights law. And like we just talked about, pregnant workers are entitled to reasonable accommodations. And workers, simply need to, again, engage in this good faith conversation and ask at any point throughout their pregnancy journey or before, so that you can get the specific accommodations that you're seeking, whether it's time off work for the prenatal appointments, whether it's breastfeeding, pumping milk at work, and things like that, changing the scope of your job duties at the workplace, like not lifting heavy objects, or being able to take as many bathroom breaks as you want, being able to, pump your milk at work as many times as you need. There's no need for a doctor's note, and employers must provide a written policy of the workers' rights that includes the pregnancy, that accrues rights related to pregnancy, breastfeeding, pumping milk at work, and all of that. I'm actually going to show you a little flyer that we have that talks about it. So this is actually the flyer. So this posting is something that is required by employers to have all over the office spaces. And it talks about, allowing pregnant employees to pump their milk at work, to have like a private safe space for them to do those functions. And this is something that is important for workers so that they could see the rights that they have at work and the pregnancy accommodations that they're entitled to in the workplace, which a lot of people don't know. And a lot of people, in the immigrant community, for instance, like don't know that they have these protections in the human rights law. And, it's really important to spread the word in the community that this is a guaranteed like human right in the workplace and in public spaces. And that these are the kinds of postings that employers are supposed to put in the workplace so that people can be made aware of their rights and the accommodations that they're entitled to at work. So in terms of lactation accommodations, employers must find a space for a lactation room that's not a bathroom, and establish a written lactation policy for the workplace. And a lactation room is defined as a clean space, again, not a bathroom, that can be used for people to pump their milk, and includes an electrical outlet, a chair, a surface on which to place a breast pump, and other personal items, and nearby access to running water. And employers must provide a reasonable time for an employee to pump. And I want to stress that case by case it's different. Like everybody has a different rate in terms of how much they need to pump their milk at work. Like this is something that the human body cannot control. So as many times as people need to pump their milk at work, they should be given that space and that accommodation. And it's also not only good for the worker to do that, but it's also good for the employer, because if you don't allow the person to pump their milk at work regularly, they can develop an infection of the breast, which will end up in that worker taking days off of work to be able to cure the infection with their doctor, right? So it's not only good for the worker, but it's also something that's really good for the employer as well. So it's, meets the bottom lines of everybody involved in the workplace. So now if a lactation space is not available, the employer must work with the employee to identify, a solution that meets that particular employee's needs. And again, a lactation room accommodation written policy should be distributed to every employee that is hired at the workplace. Should be part of like everybody's orientation packet. And the commission published a model lactation accommodation policy and a model lactation accommodation request form that after my presentation, I'll link into the chat so you can have access to it and use that as a model in your workplace. So it's a violation of the law for anybody to retaliate against anyone who's fighting for their human rights. So anybody that's opposing discrimination, who reports a discrimination complaint to us or other institutions, or someone who's cooperating or assisting with a discrimination investigation, if any of these people that I just described are being retaliated against, fired, denied promotions, and things like that, those are things that are an additional violation of the law and, should, be reported. And there's additional penalties that are assessed to people that engage in this behavior. Now, these are the examples of penalties and remedies that exist. So the commission can impose up to $125,000 in civil penalties for violations and up to $250,000 for violations that are the result of willful, wanton, and malicious conduct. And these penalties are on top of emotional damages, like legal fees that the victim might have incurred. And we also mandate them to go through a human rights training so that they can rectify the behavior and be in compliance with our human rights law. So in terms of the community engagement unit, again, we offer free workshops on the human rights law that covers a much more extensive overview of the law, because this is just a snippet of the law and how it connects to breastfeeding and pregnant people in New York City and how the law exists to protect them. But we have different presentations: an overview of the human rights law, a dedicated presentation on domestic workers, on salary history, on source of income discrimination, which is something that we see time and time again throughout the city, which is what I was saying before about people relying on government subsidies to pay the rent. And that's something that impacts people holistically, right? Like, and impacts the family. So that's why I'm stressing it so much. So if you know anybody going through that in the community, definitely encourage them to either call the hotline, report it online, or walk to any of our community service centers to speak to one of our associate human rights specialists so that we can get to the bottom of it. We also have a training for transgender communities, understanding Muslim experiences, understanding Jewish experiences. It's very varied. The rights that immigrant communities have also, as it relates to the human rights law in the workplace and beyond, is also dedicated training that we offer. So if you're interested in a workshop, please, reach out. We also have days of visibility that we go out into the community and we flyer and we speak to people in the community about the human rights law, and we do tablings. So I look forward to partnering with everybody here so that we can spread awareness about the human rights law and the commission, how people can use us as a resource to uphold their human rights in the city. So this is how you can contact the commission. You can either call 311 and ask to speak for the Commission on Human Rights, or call our info line at 212-416-0197. Our info line is now live. So again, if you call, you can speak to, any of our legal intake representatives, and they can walk you through your discrimination complaint. And here's our website, and our website has a wonderful array of information and brochures and flyers and fact sheets that I encourage you to bookmark on your computer so you can review it when you get a chance. And this is the link to also request the free trainings if you want us to do a training in the community. And collectively at the commission, we speak more than 20 languages. So, I happen to speak Spanish. So if you need anybody that, needs a presentation in Spanish on this topic, or any other language that you can imagine, you can definitely reach out to the Commission on Human Rights so that we could, make that happen. And that's the end of the presentation. I hope that we can stay in contact, and I'm going to stop sharing the screen to see if there's any questions in the chat.
Important information, powerful information. The more you know, the better. I'm a big proponent of that. Like shared information is very important. Once you know, then you can share the information, and when you have the information, you're more empowered. I want to thank you. Most people don't even know that they have rights, right? So this is something, of course, our office will definitely look forward to future events, but we can partner on. We want to make sure that New York City residents are aware of their rights. Who knew about all of those protected classes, from hair to religion to body weight and things, right? So again, I want to thank you. No, there were right. Yes. Thank you, Charlene. She just stated, it wasn't a question, but she's saying yes about the rights. If you don't know, people will take advantage of you. And a lot of thank yous. And it was a question for Miss Odessa Finn after her presentation. Sharice asked, were there any studies in regards to the amount of hormones, if any, that passed into the breast milk? Also, did she experience any side effects? So if you want to go back really quick, you want to answer that?
Sure. Thank you for that question. Very good question, because that's what a lot of the negative commentary was about. You shouldn't be feeding that baby. You're pumping that baby up with drugs. I'm just going, off of my memory from the case reports that I read about this study when it came out. It was around the world. This study, it was groundbreaking, and the side effects were not mentioned. So that's an excellent question. But in terms of the effects to the baby and what got to the baby was minimal per the journal that published the study. And again, this is one case report. For research to have any rigor, to have any quality, we like to see it repeated time and time again and see the same results. So this was one study, another one was done subsequently, but not enough data to really confidently say that there would be no effects to the baby. But the measurements, as I said before, for what got to the baby, nothing more than what we would expect from what we're eating, drinking, taking, if we're not trying to induce lactation, and the baby did thrive with the breastfeeding. I want to just share in the chat, I do see people talking about the rights of lactating workers and just rights in general. I'm sharing the link to an organization called A Better Balance, and they are legal advocates. They have a legal team. They have staff that are not lawyers, that are very fierce advocates for rights just like this. When the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act was being passed federally, they were relentless on making sure that legislation was in place for all American lactating people. New York is generally a leader in things like this, so there was some protections in place long before the passage of the federal act, but it certainly helps to undergird, because there are still some people that try to play themselves and give people a hard time that are pregnant and that are lactating. What I also am sharing the link for is because they have a free legal helpline. So if there's any ambiguity about what the law is surrounding your rights as a worker that is lactating, that is pumping, that has to feed your baby, they are happy to help. And it, again, is free. Thank you for the question that came in the chat.
Yes, our community-based partners are very, very important to the work. Like the partnership with community-based organizations and government makes a better community, right? Community informed is a community prepared. We love our partners, our CBO partners, and our advocates. We have a few chat links to drop in the chat. I don't see any other questions. We have a few.
I'm dropping some links in the chat too, Lorraine.
Okay, perfect. And then while we're throwing some links in the chat for you to reach out and connect with our speakers, their organization, or other partners, or some of our partners. Again, I want to shout out our partners. And we couldn't do this. We couldn't get this word out in the community without our partners. So I want to thank Ancient Song Doula Services, Birthright Podcast, Bronx Rebirth and Collective Progress, the Christopher Rose Community Empowerment Campaign, the IRTH App, JC Lactation Counseling, LLC, New York City Black Women's Political Club, New York City's Commission on Human Rights, New York City's Health and Hospital Harlem location, and New York City's Midwives. And last but not least is Rebecca's Little Survivors Foundation, Inc. So just again, always want to shout out our partners. We cannot do this without you. And then I want to mention that we do have some winners for our raffle giveaway. So a lucky someone will win a free lactation consultation with Janice Clarke. And then we have 3 breast pumps to help you with your birthing experience, with your breastfeeding experience. So I will call out the names and we will contact you via email, but I just want to acknowledge them. We want to make sure we acknowledge everybody. So we have Ewa Edwin, EWA Edwin. Congratulations for the free lactation counseling. Consultation, Lord have mercy. I'm so sorry, y'all. And then for the 3 breast pumps, the first winner is Dira Baker, Dira Baker. And again, we will be contacting you via the email address that you provided when you registered. So we want to congratulate Dira Baker for winning the first breast pump. And then we have, this is Paula Utila, Utila. Is our second winner of the breast pump raffle. And then the last winner is going to close us out is Moneta Lewis. Moneta Lewis, Moneta Lewis is our third winner, our third lucky winner for the breast pump. So we have Paula, Dira, and Moneta. Those are our winners for the breast pumps. And then for the free lactation consultation, that would go to Ewa. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And we will be reaching out to you via the email address that is on your registration. We want to thank you on behalf of Solomon Acevedo, our Deputy Public Advocate for Justice, Health, Equity, and Safety, the Office of the New York City Public Advocate, and myself, Lorraine Griffith, Community Organizer for Civics and Community Empowerment. We want to thank you so much. And again, ladies, this powerful info session, I cannot thank you enough for the information that you provided and shared. We want to make sure that everyone has a beautiful and bonding experience when they are breastfeeding and or chest feeding, as well as their birthing experience. We want them to have a great, healthy birthing experience, and these are all the ways to do so. And again, we want to shout out our partners, right? So thank you to our partners once again. That's Ancient Song, Doula Services, Birthright Podcast, Bronx Rebirth and Collective Progress, the Christopher Rose Community Empowerment Campaign, the IRTH App, JC Lactation Counseling LLC, New York City Black Women's Political Club, New York City Commission on Human Rights, New York City Health and Hospitals Harlem location, New York City Midwives, Rebecca's Little Survivors Foundation, Inc. And that we are going to close out where we have some chats. Hold on, we got some. So Solomon, do you want to move are you able to drop those chats, the links in the chats for the viewers before we end the program?
So I dropped a link in the chat for New York Midwives, which is the state affiliate to our national organization. For anyone that wants more information on a midwife, they can get lots of resources there. Check it out.
And how could I forget? If you would like to contact the Office of the New York City Public Advocate, you can reach us at gethelp via email, gethelp at advocate.nyc.gov. And you can reach us anytime via email, right? That goes to a general email address, and it will be answered in the order in which it was received. Okay, it's a few more people asking for the links. I see some comments asking for the link. And here, okay. So I think they were asking for the Commission on Human Rights links. If you can drop, I think it's two links. It's two links. There's 3 links from the Commission on Human Rights. If we can drop those in the comments so our viewers can have access to them. Yeah. Perfect. Okay. I think that's it. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We appreciate you, the Office of the Public Advocate. We honor our partnership with you all, and we look forward to, this is our second partnership. We look forward to many more in the future. And thank you very much, and good night.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you for joining, everyone. Be well.